Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today I have a little bit of a library book haul, a little try a chapter, a combination of things. So I'm basically wanting to support my local library more. There have been a lot of nationwide library funding cuts in the US recently, and then in my state particularly, there have been more library cuts. And the best way to support the library, at least where I live, is by checking out books. So I am trying to more frequently, or at least once a month, actually check out books. I use all sorts of other library services, but I know this is the service that helps them in terms of stats the most, and so that's what I'm doing. So I've given myself a little challenge to check out books each month, but I only need to read one, which is fun because I get to like book haul stuff. I get to try books I've been wanting to read but not sure I want to buy, and all those kinds of things. So what I've been doing with my channel members is like trying this out and figuring out how I want to do this little challenge. And I think I've figured it out. I'm basically going to haul 8 library books, but I'm only going to try out a handful of them. So the first thing I've done, and I've already done this with my channel members, is I've read like the first couple pages of all 8 books, and then I've narrowed it down to 4. In this occasion, I checked all 4 books out, and I will talk to you about these. And then what I'm going to do for everyone is I'm going to spend 15 minutes reading all 4 of these books, let you know what they're about, what my thoughts are on them, and then pick one book that I think will possibly be a 5-star read, or at least my favorite of the bunch, and read that in completion, assuming that I find one. This is actually the second time I'm trying to film this video, because the first time I went through that whole process, got the books home, read them for 15 minutes each, and wasn't interested in continuing any of them, at least not at that particular moment. I feel like I'm in a better reading space right now, so I have high hopes. So I'm about to start some member sprints. I'm looking over here at my computer. And I'm going to share with you the 4 books that I'm going to try. Like I said, I'm going to spend 15 minutes reading each of these books. Then I will come back and I will talk to you about them. I'll let you know what they're about and what my impressions are in the first 15 minutes. Now, 15 minutes is not necessarily long enough to give you a full impression of a book. I'm not reviewing these books unless I read them in completion, but 15 minutes is long enough for me to know whether or not I want to read the book right now. That doesn't mean I'll never read them at any point in the future. It's just what I feel like reading right now. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, the one of the books, I'm not going to say the first book. Actually, I have decided how I'm going to approach these books. I'm actually in the mood to listen to an audiobook, so I have found 2 of the books I'm interested in on audio. So I'm going to try 2 of them on audiobooks for 15 minutes, and 2 I'm just going to physically read for 15 minutes because they're not an audiobook, likely because they're both new releases. So I'll start with the 2 new releases that don't have an audiobook. One of them is Zone Rouge. I actually think that this is the one that I'm most likely to like, except for the fact that I really want an audiobook right now. This just came out in September, I believe, and yeah, I'm very fascinated. It's about sort of the red zone, as the name implies, in France. And I'll talk more about it when I get to it, but this is book 1. Book number 2, that is also a newer release that I think was also released in September, that I didn't think I was going to be that interested in, and didn't even mention in my new release video, even though I knew about it. And then I read the first couple of pages and I was like, ooh, I want to know some more. And that book is Wanting. And the thing that caught my attention about this book is that I didn't realize there was going to be like so much drama. There's definitely some opening mystery drama that I'm like, oh, okay, where is this going? So it did make me want to read at least the entire first chapter. So we'll see what happens with that. The 2 audiobooks I have are one is a classic and the other one has been released like a bit earlier, so that's why I think they're both available on audiobook. The classic I'm looking at is Uncle Silas, and there are a couple of viewers on my channel who are currently buddy reading this, and even they're excited about what's happening, and they've had nothing but good things to say about it, so I've got pretty high hopes about this one. And like I said, it's on audiobook. It is probably the thickest of the 4 books that I'm considering, and I do have a buddy read coming up, but I have about 5 days before that happens. This book is just under 500 pages, so with an audiobook, I do think I can squeeze this in between. So that would also be a good option because I feel like I would be able to read this in between without having like a day or two with no other book going on. So we'll see about that. It's just going to depend on how I like the audiobook, how I like physically reading it, that kind of thing. And then the last one is Pet. And this is a funny book because I picked it up at the library. I read the premise of the book and then was like, I don't think I want to read that. But then compared to some of the other books, I was like, well, I have read this author before. Maybe I will give her a try. So when I sit down with it today, this will be the first time I've read any of the pages of this one, which was not how I was intending to do this part, but it'll be interesting to see. And like I said, I will go through what all of those books are about after I've read them for 15 minutes, and I will kind of come and give you an idea of the book as a whole, as well as maybe what happens in the first couple of minutes of the book, or hopefully what happens at the beginning of the book up to the inciting event where things like really kick off. Typically, depending on the book, the first 15 minutes of reading can get you to about that point. With Uncle Silas, because it's a classic, expositions or the start of the book, the setup, the character introduction, all of that stuff tends to take a little bit longer in classics because they were used to having that part of the book be longer. So I don't know that I'll get to that same place with Uncle Silas, but I'm really hoping 15 minutes will be enough to give me a taste of each of these books. And I need to go and get on this sprint, which is perfect timing because that's going to give me my first 15 minutes of each of these, and we'll see how it goes from there. All right, I'll check back in with you after I have read at least one of these books. Okay, so I am back. I had a good time on those sprints, and despite what I thought I was going to come in and out after each book and talk to you guys about what my thoughts were, but that didn't happen. So I'm just going to talk to you about all of them, and I'm trying to decide what order I want to go in. I think I'm going to go in the order of, I don't want to say my least favorite, but I guess just the order of like what I least want to read to what most piqued my interest and what I decided to read. So my least favorite of the four, or at least the one that I felt least interested in continuing, was Zone Rouge. I'm horrible at predicting what I'm going to give 5 stars, at least based on the premise. Like, the premise of the book still really intrigues me. It's definitely still a book that I will consider checking out at some point. It is a new release, and I'm glad I got it from the library. It's just too much on the literary style and the writing style for my taste. It's definitely more about the narration and the writing style so far, and the topic. Like, the topic of the book is really important, and I haven't told you what any of these books are about yet, so let me go back to that. So Zone Rouge is following a set of people who are spending their lives in the ruined fields in France, basically removing shrapnel and unexploded grenades and bombs from the major world wars that are still in these fields. And so the book very much starts out with that, shows a little bit of how like the farmers are still living like, or trying to live everyday farming life, but having issues where their combine is being blown up because it accidentally sucked up a grenade or something crazy like that, and how they're having to use equipment that they like homemade equipment that they've made to remove shrapnel from the stomach of their cows. And there's a hawk flying through my backyard. I should really keep the shades closed when I film. Anyway, yeah, definitely some disturbing imagery, some things and issues that I've never thought about before, which is what drew this book to me. But it's also definitely on the side of literary fiction, which I would have expected. This is published by, or put out by, an independent publisher, I believe, an indie press. Yes, unnamed press. And so that's par for the course with that. So I should have known. So if you like literary fiction, this might be a book that's worth checking out at your library. But for me, because I had options, it was one that I didn't feel compelled to keep reading. But if it was the only book I had, or if I bought it, like I would still read it. Like I said, I'm not removing it from like my want to read some point. It's just like on this list, lower down on the list. Next, I did find that I had 2 books on audiobook, and so I decided to vary it up and try some on audiobook. The next book that I picked up and that well, I don't know if it was the next book that I picked up, but at least the next book that I'm going to talk about is Uncle Silas. And this was fine. This was good. I liked the writing style. It was moving along. What wasn't capturing me about this book was actually how it was going to be plotted, where there is this whole idea of like some sort of mystery following Uncle Silas, and Uncle Silas is the younger brother of the, well, Uncle Silas is the uncle of the protagonist. The other way I was going to state that was going to be very convoluted, but it's her paternal uncle. And her father has fallen out with Uncle Silas years ago for reasons she doesn't know. And you kind of get the sense that there's going to be this mystery of why did this falling out happen? Why don't they talk? Who is Uncle Silas? What is he really like? The father's like, why are you focusing on Uncle Silas? That has nothing to do with anything. Her father's had a conversation with this like strange guy who she also doesn't know and has had said mysterious things to her. And it's just layers of mysteries that it's like, let's read the whole book. That's really long. And eventually, probably in the last 10 pages, have everything revealed. And that's my least favorite way of convincing me as a reader to move through a book. I'm not a huge mystery person, basically. And this sounds like it's going to be a lot more mystery than anything else. I could very well be wrong about that. Again, this is not a book that I'm just going to say, I'm done, I'm never reading it. It just fell lower on the pile for me. So yeah, so I'll have to try Uncle Silas another time. Maybe I would have sunk more into it if I was physically reading it instead of listening on the audiobook. So the next time I go to pick this up, I will definitely just physically try it. And then the next book that I had, so the one that almost made the cut and I thought was going to, is Wanting. Um, this actually semi-surprised me. Like I said, it opens with a really intriguing premise where there are the two women, one of them the main character, the other one her best friend, and they're standing outside a burning mansion. And one of them was like, oh, this was just supposed to be a party. Okay, already intrigued. However, that does put it in the Uncle Silas category of like, we start at the end, now we're going to have to go back to the beginning to get the whole story to figure out how we got to the end. So I wasn't thrilled about that, but I did like the writing style in this better. We then move into basically the opening of the book, which has our protagonist and she is house hunting. So it really wasn't enough to like draw me into the book and want me to keep reading, but I was really at that point only moving into the second chapter. This, again, like the other three, is something that I will still consider. It just didn't make the cut for this go round of what I'm going to read next. That said, I'm really glad I'm doing this experience and this experiment with the library books, because this was a book that I was initially thinking of just completely overlooking based on the premise. And I don't know that without this library challenge that I would have picked up the book and ever given it a try. So in a lot of ways, doing this challenge has added a book onto my TBR, at least my TBR like want to read one day list, and hasn't really removed anything yet. And I guess that's a good thing. But probably the complete shock to me is the book that I not only liked but decided to keep reading, and that was Pet. Now I have some concerns, but let me first tell you what my thoughts were about this book, what this book is about, and what my fears are. So, okay, so I'll start with why I chose this book and why it was a surprise. I mentioned, I think, that I had not actually read this book when I was at the library, because at first I chose 8 books off the shelves and I sat down with 4 of them immediately. Well, I sat down with all of them immediately and like read the first like 2 pages of each of them. And based on that, and don't judge. This is just for fun. That's not normally how I pick books. But just based on that, I came up with those other 3 books. And then I couldn't decide on a 4th book because the 4 other books really had something about them I didn't like. And this book, as soon as I read the premise of, I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to want to read that. And so I didn't even bother reading the first page or 2. But after I had gone through everything and realized I really didn't want to read the other 4, I was like, maybe I didn't give this a fair chance and should have at least read the opening. And then I was out of time at the library, so I was like, I'll just make this the 4th book. I have read from this author before, so I figured that was going to kind of be a safe bet, or at least like help me figure out whether or not I liked it. I guess what I'm saying is because I had read from the author before, I knew that I liked at least one style that she could write in, and she didn't come across to me as an author who would change her writing style a lot. She comes across to me more as an author who changes like the subjects of her books and the style of, and what she's writing about more than the style in which she's writing. And I am finding that to be true. The other book I read of hers was The Axeman's Carnival, and I really enjoyed that book. I gave it like 4.5 stars. The reason I didn't pick up and read this book in the library and was like, I don't know about that one, is because of the topic. And the topic is about a young girl who is 12 years old and she's in school with her friends and they're all doing well, and they get a new teacher in class. And the next thing Justine finds is that she really wants to be the teacher's pet. And so she kind of, like all the other students and some of the parents, kind of becomes obsessed with the new teacher. They all kind of realize that the teacher kind of makes pets out of the students, not like literal pets, but, like you're the teacher's pet kind of pet. And she has suddenly found herself in that role or wanting that role and wanting to stay in that role. And in the beginning of the book, let me back up. And so my concern with that was I was like, is this going in like some sort of weird Lolita direction? Like, why does she want to be the teacher's pet? How does the teacher feel about that? But then the book says that it is probes themes of racism, misogyny, and the oppressive reaches of Catholicism. So then I was like, that's not what I would have guessed from that opening premise. So anyway, this was one of the books that I brought home, trusting that I would like the author again. I do like the writing style again, it's fine. It is a book that I was able to find on audiobook, and I have heard other people say that they really like this book. So I am liking the writing style so far. The opening does talk a lot about the teacher and does show you how everybody in this community is kind of obsessed with this woman, thinks she's like really wise and smart, or just like want to get to know her. She's a younger woman. And so the book is like just starting to ramp up, but there's been allusions to like something going wrong. And I'm not sure what that something is, but Justine is indeed becoming the teacher's pet. So we're going to see where things go from there. And surprisingly enough, I have already seen the themes of racism and misogyny and Catholicism has come up frequently. So the inside flap's not lying about that. It's just not the direction I thought things were going to go in. So maybe that's a good thing, because if it goes in the direction that I was initially thinking it was going in, I may end up DNFing the book because I do not like to read about that. But if it stays on the path that it's mostly on, this might end up being a 5-star. I don't know. I'm not getting 5-star vibes yet, but I am really liking it. It's definitely already in the 4-star range. Anyway, that's it. I just wanted to share that with you. Maybe I will add some more onto this video, but I already feel like it's long enough because I was initially thinking of vlogging my experience of reading the book, but I think this video is going to be too long if I do that. So you will just have to wait until I do my normal weekly reading wrap up to see what I ended up thinking about Pet. And I'll be interested to see too. Hopefully this is a sign that my little, library experience will work, because the whole idea is that I want to start borrowing more, or at least as much as I buy in terms of books. So we'll see how that goes. But I am excited about this and I'm glad it worked out. Let me know if you use your library frequently and what you like to haul from there, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.